Well, my name is Lindsey and I do have the honor of serving as a regional mobilization manager for International Justice Mission. I'm actually based in Washington, D.C. at our headquarters there, but I travel across 12 states, from Colorado to Michigan and everywhere in between to talk to people like yourself and to tell people the good news about God's plan for justice in our world. And I first just want to thank Casey, and I want to thank the whole crew for inviting me out here today. It's so fun to do things like this. This is one of my favorite parts of my job. So I'm just so grateful to be part of this conference and a part of what is going on here in Springfield and in Missouri and in the nation and ultimately the world, because the conversations that we're having here today are crucial. And I mean, I just want to reiterate what Casey said yesterday. This is where we are gathering and we're learning and we're being equipped, but then we're being sent out. So I'm going to do a little bit of both today because I know our conference ends, just a couple hours away. We're going to be sent. So let's jump in. So a little bit about myself. I grew up in Colorado, in the beautiful state of Colorado. I am biased, of course. I think it's the best state out of all 50, including the district. But my home was in the shadow of the Rocky Mountains, so I grew up going to the mountains all the time. I would go skiing and snowboarding and all of the winter things, but the mountains are equally as wonderful in the summertime. And during my undergrad years, I was so close to the mountains that often I would take the short 20 or so minute drive to the mountains, find a trailhead and park, and go hike for an hour or two, and then go back to class. So it was just a really magical place to grow up and go to school, and I miss it a lot. But growing up in Colorado, surrounded by mountains, means that you were also surrounded by a lot of gear, outdoor gear. Do you guys have an REI here? Have you heard of REI? I'm sure you have. It's like the outdoor mecca, right? So you can buy anything in the world there, including this book that was on the shelf of anyone who found themselves in the mountains often, climbing, camping, etc., etc. So it's this book right here. It's called The Freedom of the Hills, and it was published by the Mountaineers. And this book is packed full of every information on equipment, on how to tie a proper knot, on climbing holds and techniques. So this book has literally everything you would want to know about surviving in the mountains, and that's why they refer to it as the Bible of mountaineering and climbing. So this book was on my shelf. It was on a lot of my friends' shelves, and the information in it was so critical that they even made these playing cards that you could pack in your pack and strap on your back and take with you. It had all of the critical information in it, and you could recite them. So it's like flashcards, like you're in school, only for survival in the mountains. Kind of cool. So if you take the time to learn everything in the book, as many Coloradans try to do, I did not, I was not one of them. But you will know everything you need to know to go on grand expeditions and climb the mountains, and will have all the knowledge that it takes to experience the freedom of the hills. By reading this book, you may have all of the knowledge it takes to climb a mountain or survive in the mountains, and you can memorize all the critical points. You can know everything that there is to know about mountains. But that doesn't actually give you the experience of mountain climbing. It doesn't give you the experience of being in the hills, the freedom of the hills. To be a mountain climber, you have to actually leave the safety, security, and comfort of your home, of the valley, and you have to climb. The goal of the book is not to be read. The goal of the book is to apply the practical knowledge that you learn and then go do. I've hiked 2 14ers in Colorado, which is a mountain that's higher than the elevation of 14,000 feet. It is windy. It's windy and it's cold and it can be pretty treacherous, and the views are beautiful, but there's also not a lot of oxygen. It gets hard to breathe. Even just walking around, you find yourself gasping for air. And a lot of times when you're on your way up, especially as you get closer to the peak, it feels like the mountain is resisting you, which is so strange because the mountain's not alive, but it feels like it is, and it feels like it's actively resisting you. you could also, there's a very real danger in this. You could slip and you could fall. And there is an element of risk that could potentially lead to death. Like, people have died mountain climbing. So there's a very real element of risk, which is why books like that exist, to teach us how to survive in situations like that. So it's safe here. Imagine you're in a cabin in Breckenridge, which is one of my favorite little cities in the world, and it's safe and warm, and you're on the sofa by the fireplace, and you're drinking some hot chocolate, and you think, oh, well, this is nice. I mean, that looks nice too, but this is nice, so I don't know. But if you stay there in the safety and security, if you avoid the vulnerabilities that you naturally face when you climb a mountain like this, you're never going to experience the soaring heights, and you're never truly going to know the freedom of the hills. So you'll be safe, but it'll kind of be boring. Like, how long can you actually sit by your fire and just soak? How long can you do that before you're kind of bored and your life can kind of become unfulfilling? That moment can become unfulfilling. So you might be wondering where I'm going with all this mountain talk. I promise I'm not here just to talk about mountains. I want to share a couple stories with you, and then I'm going to walk through some scripture. And my hope is that when you walk out of here today, and when we're done talking, you're going to know three things. So if you're a note taker, I try to bullet point this, so this is something that you can write down. My hope is that you walk away knowing and believing about yourself three things to be true. And I'm going to walk through each of those as we walk through some stories and some scripture. And the first thing that I hope that you walk away believing about yourself is that you are called to biblical justice regardless of your unique calling. So you are called to biblical justice regardless of your unique calling. So whether you're a teacher, whether you're a stay-at-home parent, whether you're a lawyer, a professional, or a barista, whatever your calling is in life, you are still called to biblical justice. So the situation where the knowledge about mountaineering is actually there, but the experience is missing, is not too different than what we see in Isaiah 58. And I'm sure a lot of you folks in here know Isaiah 58 really well. But if you'll recall, God's people are really frustrated because he's not showing up in the way that they expected him to show up. They're not having the experience of him in the way that they wanted. So we're going to dive into some scripture this morning, and I'm going to be starting in verse 2 of chapter 58. I'm reading out of the New Living Translation. Verse 2 says, "Yet they act so pious. They come to the temple every day and seem delighted to learn all about me. They act like a righteous nation that would never abandon the laws of its God. They ask me to take action on their behalf, pretending they want to be near me. We have fasted before you, they say. Why aren't you impressed? We have been very hard on ourselves and you don't even notice it." So after God recites back his people's complaints about them, about their lack of experience, he tells them what the problem is. After God recites back to his people their complaints about their lack of experiences, he tells them what the problem is. And he says, "I will tell you why," I responded. "It's because you are fasting to please yourselves. Even while you fast, you keep oppressing your workers. So what good is fasting when you keep on fighting and quarreling? This kind of fasting will never get you anywhere with me. You humble yourselves by going through the motions of penance, bowing your heads like reeds bending in the wind. You dress in burlap and cover yourselves with ashes. Is this what you call fasting? Do you really think this will please the Lord?" So in these verses, we see the very essence of the problem. It's that the people of God are simply going through the motions. They're fasting to please themselves. It's empty and self-centered and religious ritual. This doesn't draw us near to God, and he says that. In the next few verses, God tells his people what they must do to draw near to him. So he says, "No, this is the kind of fasting that I want. Free those who are wrongly imprisoned. Lighten the burden of those who work for you, and let the oppressed go free, and remove the chains that bind people. Share your food with the hungry, and give shelter to the homeless. Give clothes to those who need them, and do not hide from any relatives who need your help. I want that to sink in. This is how we actually draw near to God. This is how God is directing his people to draw close to him. It's all about rescuing the captives, setting them free, stop oppressing their workers and their people, don't hide from their relatives who are in need. That's how we draw close to God. So with the true fast that he's describing in Isaiah 58, then comes this incredible promise in verse 8. It says, "Then your salvation will come like the dawn, and your wounds will quickly heal. Your godliness will lead you forward, and the glory of the Lord will protect you from behind. Then when you call, the Lord will answer, 'Yes, I am here.' He will quickly reply." This is such an incredible promise that God is extending to us, that if we leave safety and security behind, and if we take risks, and if we become vulnerable, and if we engage with the things that are hard in this world, with the brokenness, and we free the oppressed people, you will have what you truly desire. Because isn't that what we truly want in this world, is to be close to God? Because that's what we're called, that's what we were created to do, is to be close to our Maker. And he says that I will be with you and you will experience me, the living God. So this is why each of us is called to biblical justice regardless of your calling. Because justice is at the heart of God, and in order to draw close to God, that's what we do. We do justice. That's part of our faith. So this all sounds great. The promise is incredible that if we do justice, that God will draw near to us. But how do we actually know that's true? Because I don't know about you, but sometimes for me, I'm reading through scripture and I see these promises and I'm like, wow, that's amazing. I don't think I've seen that in my life. So how do I know it's true? You know? Most of you will be familiar with the story of Moses. It's one of my favorites in the Old Testament. I'm sure you know that the Israelites were kept in slavery in Egypt, and Moses was sent to free them. But I want to point to one specific moment in the story that really captivated me as I'm thinking about this idea of biblical justice. And it comes from Exodus chapter 3. When we are reading about the story of Moses encountering God in the burning bush and receiving instructions to go to Pharaoh and to demand a release of his people. So God says, I want you to do this thing. And the first reaction of Moses is that he balks back at God. And he says, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" And God said in verse 12, "I will be with you." I want you to notice that God's answer to Moses wasn't reassuring Moses in who he was and his own identity. Moses thinking about his story and what his life story was up to this point, he had great reasons to have that natural response, right? So you know that he was born himself a Hebrew. He was essentially abandoned by his mother for a great reason. She didn't want him to be slaughtered. He was taken in by royalty. He was basically raised an Egyptian royal. And because of this conflict in identity, he basically had this internal conflict that he didn't quite know what to do with. And he ended up killing an Egyptian. And so here he stands, God is speaking to him in this strange experience of this bush that's burning but not being engulfed with fire, and God is telling him to go back to Pharaoh, back to the land that he basically fled from for his life. There's risk, there's real risk here. And God is saying to him now, "But I choose you. It's you I want to send." And so these are all great reasons that Moses is protesting. I mean, just picture yourself in that situation. What would your response be to God? Would you say, "Sure, I'll just go back to Pharaoh, the person who wants me dead"? I don't think that would be our natural response. So in the protest, God answers by simply saying nothing about Moses, but about him. "I will be with you." It's not about Moses, it's about God. And as I was reflecting on this, I thought to myself, how often do we look at problems in the world like slavery, this massive problem of modern day slavery where millions of people are trapped and We know that we're called, we see that because we all know that we are called to biblical justice regardless of our calling, but we think, I'm not the right person, it just feels too big of a problem, the giant of slavery is too big, or I don't have the skills, what do I practically contribute? So the great news about this is that this doesn't rest on your shoulders. Justice is in God's DNA. And when you respond to his call, to this call of biblical justice, he makes you capable not because of who you are or your qualifications, but because of who he is and his qualifications. So this is the second thing that I want you to walk away believing about yourself, is that you are capable because of who God is, not because of who you are, because of who God is, okay? So, what happens when you know that you're called to biblical justice and you believe that you're capable, because I really want you to believe that you are capable, because it doesn't rest on your shoulders. But what's next? So 15 years ago, International Justice Mission began receiving reports that very small children, as young as 7 years old, were being sold for sexual exploitation in areas of Cambodia, specifically outside of Phnom Penh, called Sepak. And at that time, 15 to 30% of the females in brothels were children, they were minors. IJM conducted several investigations that verified these reports, and when we presented them to the government, to the police bodies in Cambodia, to anyone who would listen, they wouldn't do anything. They wouldn't do anything to protect these children. And in fact, the police were actually protecting the brothels because they had connections to the brothel owners and the people in power, and they were protecting the brothels, not the children, not the most vulnerable. And so in that type of situation, there was no hope for those children. If the police weren't there to protect them, and they were in fact protecting the brothels and the people in power who were abusing them, they had no one to turn to. So in 2003, IJM went back and did an undercover investigation in Phnom Penh. And in our investigation, my colleagues ID'd 50 children under the age of 15 in these brothels. The situation that was in Cambodia, in Sepak, that's not happening anymore. And I want to be clear about that. So as we're talking about this, I don't want you to think that this is the situation that still is happening in Cambodia right now. The footage that my colleagues were able to gather from their undercover investigations led to IJM's first successful operation in Cambodia. And there were several girls that were rescued. There were actually 9 of them, and they were all under the age of 10 years old. And the operation was a tremendous success, but it revealed all the holes in Cambodia's justice system. What was going on there is one of our undercover investigators, you probably heard him with the Western accent, he was talking with the Mama-san about the purchase of a young girl. And the Mama-san was saying, we have fresh girls, virgin girls, I don't know if you caught that, and then she was saying, it's $600 a night for this girl. And then our investigator pressed her a little bit more, saying $600 for one night or for 3 nights, and she said, it doesn't matter, because as soon as you take her virginity, she's not going to be worth as much to me anymore. And we captured hundreds of hours of footage like this, and I have so much respect for my undercover colleagues who do work like this all the time. That is an impossibly hard situation to be in, where you are there acting as a John, interested in purchasing a young girl for sex, knowing that you're just gathering evidence, you're gathering footage so you can set them free, but then you have to walk away. And in the footage, if we can pull this up later, maybe we'll show you guys in a bit, but you can see the young girls sitting there. They're in the room while this transaction is happening. And so the investigator is looking at these girls who 6 years old, 7 years old, maybe, and they're listening to all this take place. And then the investigator has to get up and walk away. And that is one of the most brutal, heartbreaking things I could ever imagine. But the hope is that we did go back to that brothel, in fact, and we did rescue those girls, in fact. So it wasn't in vain that we went and we collected all this footage, but the work is really hard. So what we learned after that first rescue operation was that the police didn't know how to do this. They had never done this before. They didn't know how to plan or execute an operation. They didn't know how to collect the proper evidence. They didn't know how to handle suspects even, and all because they've never done it before. But equally, they didn't know how to handle the victims. And in the beginning, the police officers treated them like they were the criminals. And they, at some points, took them into a jail cell and would have them locked up. And one of our aftercare workers would stay with the young victims, but the police just didn't know how to handle it because they had never done it before. So after this, IJM established an office in Cambodia to work alongside the local law enforcement and authorities, because our theory of change at IJM is that when you partner with local law enforcement, local authorities, governing bodies to enforce the laws that are already on the books. Slavery is illegal in every country in the world. It is on their own law books. Every single country in this world, it is illegal. But slavery persists because laws are not enforced. So our theory of change, and that we've seen over the last 20 years of the life of our organization, is that when you enforce these laws by working with local law enforcement and working with local authorities and empower them to protect the poor, you see rescue operations that are being led by those local authorities. So in Cambodia specifically, we began a partnership with the Cambodian police unit, and we were able to stand up an anti-trafficking unit with them in Phnom Penh, and this was a game changer. Complete game changer. So in the 5 years that followed, 342 children were rescued, 126 suspects arrested, and out of that 126, 75 were convicted for their crimes. In 5 years of working with law enforcement, who from our first operation, it was a daunting task. It was a daunting task and it was a mountain. But this is what biblical justice looks like, is that slow persistence. So with the laws finally being enforced, brothels in Spaypak that were selling these little girls to Western pedophiles shut down. So one of the first brothels that we did a rescue operation at, it was shut down. And that's the Cambodian National Police that are doing that. And then they invited us to help stand up anti-human trafficking units throughout the entire country, not just in Spaypak, not just in Phnom Penh, but around the entire country. And today, 15 years after IJM began our work there, we are celebrating the complete transformation of Cambodia. IJM has trained police in leadership. The anti-human trafficking units that were stood up around the country are effectively enforcing the laws and protecting people. Prosecutors are working better with police. The courts are working more efficiently. There's world-class systems of aftercare who are taking care of these young victims. And brothels in Spaypak that were closed 15 years ago are still closed today. Transformation. In a recent intensive research study that IJM did with local partners and a completely independent research study, found less than 0.1% of people who were being sold for sex. 0.1% of those were children under the age of 16. 0.1%. That is a miracle from where we were 15 years ago. A complete miracle. And the great part about this, again, is that the Cambodian authorities are doing this on their own more and more. So much so that IJM actually ended our anti-sex trafficking operations in Cambodia because it was working. The justice system had been transformed. It was working. And so now in Cambodia, we shifted our casework type to a different type of trafficking. But as I was thinking about this, I'm thinking, isn't this awesome? Like, God fulfilled his promise that he talked about. Light broke forth like the dawn in Cambodia. And the police, so Cambodia, remember, where the police were working to protect the brothels are now shutting them down. The most corrupt, the most broken country in Southeast Asia has now become a model for justice, for the way that countries can end commercial sex. And the children are safe. The children there, their battle with sex trafficking has ended. It's over for them because the police officers in Cambodia are keeping them safe because they are doing their jobs and they're enforcing the laws. So this, I think, is just a beautiful picture of the hope that we have for what can happen in the world when we join together. My colleagues in Cambodia, as I was thinking to myself, how did this happen? And we think a lot about this at IJM, how does this happen? How do we replicate this? And as I was thinking about it, and knowing some of my colleagues in Cambodia, it actually became very simple for me, because it was a group of Christians that decided to leave the safety and security of their homes and took ridiculous risks because they read the scriptures and they believed them to be true. They knew that they were called and they knew that they were capable because of who God is. And this is the third thing, is that they were ready to act. So this is the third thing that I want you to walk away believing about yourself, is that wherever you're at, you are ready. You are ready. And this is biblical justice. So what my colleagues did in Cambodia was incredible. And when you dig down into their personal stories and talk to each of them about what happened, like how did this amazing transformation happen, what they would tell you is that they simply did what they could with what they had. And when you approach the work of biblical justice with this open hands posture, God meets you there. And just like the miracle of the loaves and the fish, God multiplies that action. He multiplies it. And if all of us do that, imagine the change that could happen there. Because God wants to multiply actions that glorify Him. And remember back in Isaiah 58, that glorifies Him. It's drawing us close to Him and it glorifies Him. So I hope this is encouraging for you, but for some, I'm sure you might be thinking, this is amazing. This is so cool to hear about Cambodia's transformation. But I'm not in Cambodia. I'm not even close to Asia. I'm in Missouri, in the middle of the United States. And I can't actually go to brothel doors and break them down and rescue the girls. And I can't arrest the pimps and the Johns who are doing this. I'm a student, or I'm a barista, or I'm a full-time professional. So where do I fit in with this grand justice movement that God is building? So I'm going to ask you to picture a snapshot of the civil rights movements of the 60s in your head. So Martin Luther King, the March on Washington. Picture something in your head. You got it? You got that picture? Okay. So many of us would actually think about Dr. King's famous speech, I Have a Dream. Or we would imagine the pictures that we've seen of the March on Washington in 1963. And I would include myself in that group. But I recently came across what is now one of my favorite stories from the civil rights movement, and I want to share that with you. It's a story about a man named Ledger Smith. I'm just curious, has anyone heard of Ledger Smith? No? One person? Okay. Well, let me introduce him to you. So, this is Ledger Smith. He was a 27-year-old in 1963 working as a truck driver and living in Chicago. And he wanted to help spread the word about the march and inspire and mobilize others to support. So he left his home, Ledger did, at 7 a.m., August 17th, 1963, leaving from Michigan Ave in downtown Chicago. And he made his way through South Bend and Fort Wayne, Ohio, to Wheeling, West Virginia, to Pittsburgh and Uniontown, finally cutting through Hagerstown and Frederick in Maryland, and then at last arriving in Washington, D.C. on August 27th. So that's an incredible route right there. That's what he did. He was wearing a red sash that said freedom written on it for everyone he encountered to see. And it was this incredible journey for him because, did you catch those dates? So he left on August 17th and he arrived August 27th. There's some time in between there. So what makes this journey so remarkable is that he didn't drive, he didn't fly, he didn't go on a bus. No, Ledger Smith, roller skated. He roller skated the entire 685 miles from Chicago to Washington, D.C. Roller skated. After weeks of training and being clocked at speeds of 25 miles per hour, Ledger created a moment in the larger movement of justice. So he was followed by friends who were driving in a car next to him. They had food, and they had 3 extra sets of wheels in case he blew one. And after this journey, Ledger arrived safely, even after repeated attempts of white supremacists to run him off the road. He arrived to a cheering crowd and was also 20 pounds lighter. It's a real thing. He smiled, and he wasn't a man of many words. He just simply said, "I think my legs have done enough talking." And I love Ledger's story so much because he knew he was called, and he knew he was capable of doing something, and he was ready to seize the moment. He was ready to seize the moment, and he did what he could with what he had. Ledger had a pair of roller skates. Think what you have. So it's easy for us to look at really significant moments, or these tipping point moments, as sometimes historians refer to them to, like Dr. King's "I Have a Dream" speech, or even what my colleagues did in Cambodia, transforming a nation in regards to sex trafficking, actually going on multiple brothel raids to rescue young girls from sex trafficking. But both of these mountaintop moments are just that. They're moments. They're moments in the larger movement. They are not the movement themselves. Do you catch that? They're moments. They're not the movements. Because movements are really the culmination of hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands of moments. And when you stop to look at them collectively, all of the moments all together, eventually you get the movement. But without these moments, without the speeches, without the roller skating, you don't have a movement. So remember the book, Freedom of the Hills, and it's bringing us back to that. Let me ask you, will we be the ones to buy the book, to read it, to memorize it, to know every single piece of critical information in it, and believe with all of our hearts that the principles in this book are true, but we never actually climb? We never experience the freedom of the hills. Will we be like those old mountain huts, like this? People gather around a warm fire, surrounded by all these climbing artifacts, to hear stories of the epic expeditions of the past that they haven't experienced themselves. Or will we be the ones to go to the mountains? Will we be the ones in our churches and schools and our communities, launching the expeditions and leading the way? Will we be the ones taking the risks and bringing others along on our own expeditions and inspiring them to start their own great expedition? My colleagues and I at IJM, we are on the mountain. And there are moments when it's really, really tough. The risks are real, I will tell you that. My job, working at headquarters, is a relatively safe job. I travel around the States, I travel by plane and sometimes by train, I'm driving all the time, I'm speaking, I'm relatively safe. My colleagues in the field risk their lives every single day. And in fact, one of our own beloved, Willie Kamani, last year, he was a lawyer in our Kenya office doing his job. He was representing one of our clients who was a victim of police abuse of power. And the police were strong men who didn't want to relent that power. And Willie Kamani and our client Joseph and our driver Josephat were abducted by the police, and they were tortured and they were murdered, and their bodies were dumped in a river. And that hurt IJM. We lost one of our own on the mountain. And I'm telling you, the risk in this is real. It is so real, and we felt it so vividly last year. But I will also tell you, and my colleagues in my Kenya field office team, they will tell you that it's still worth it. We've experienced the grief and the deep loss of one of our own beloved who's on this mountain with us. But they would still say that it is worth it because we are called to biblical justice. This isn't our own journey that we're creating. This isn't our own story that we are writing. This is a story that God is writing with the moments we create. And it is exhausting, and it is tiring, but it is worth the fight. And it is a fight. Let me tell you that. There's times when you're navigating uncharted territory and you feel like no one here cares. No one here cares about this. I'm telling you that people are being trafficked right here in Springfield, and you're talking to someone in your church group or at your workplace, and they look at you with this like, huh, did you watch the game the other night? You're like, is this thing on? Am I not getting to you? That's exhausting, friends. This work of justice is long. The moral arc of the universe, it is long, but it bends toward justice. Dr. King said that, and it is true. It is so true. I can tell you from my own personal experience. It is true because the reality is that this is what it takes. What we're doing in this room, this is what it takes to make justice a reality on this earth. In the long fight against justice in our world, God is simply asking for moments that he can weave together to create this tapestry of the justice movement. It's not on our shoulders. What we have, what our responsibility is to create a moment, to create multiple moments. So this is an open invitation to you to create your moment, because each of us are called, each of us are capable, and each of us are ready right now. Because the fight is real right now. It's happening right now. Now. There's an urgency about this because real lives are on the line. And you know what that looks like? It's simply doing what you can with what you have. Just like Ledger Smith and his roller skates. So a few of us, very few of us, will ever give an I Have a Dream speech. And a few of us will physically lead slaves from slavery like Moses did, or like my colleagues in Cambodia did. And some of us will roller skate or will march in the streets. More of us will use our mastery spreadsheets. More of us will use our financial resources that have been gifted to us. More of us will use what has been given to us naturally, what comes to us naturally and fills us with life. That passion you have, use that to create your moment. And be creative because God is creative. He can use the most creative moments in the world and weave them into the movement. So whatever your goal is, whatever moment God is stirring and you, calling you to create, do it well. This is what I want to exhort to you. Do it well. Do your movement, do it with excellence. Because those trapped in slavery and violence deserve our best. So like Joseph and his family in Kenya, who were victims of police abuse of power, and Vasanti and her family in India, who were trapped for generations in a brick kiln in Chennai. And Nien from Spapak, Cambodia, whose body was sold time and time and time again. Friends, God is inviting all of us to leave the safety and security behind and put into practice the things that we know and believe. He calls us to seek justice, and he promises to meet us there. And he makes us capable because of who he is. And we are ready. You are ready to create your moment. And friends, the stakes are high. The work of justice is a matter of simple obedience, and it's the mark of an authentic gospel. It means that God's people have been liberated from fear. But if we neglect justice, a perishing world will ignore our gospel, because in a world in trouble, such a gospel will not be credible. We need the moments, we need the action in there to make our gospel credible. It won't be the whole gospel because it won't reflect the holiness of God, and it won't reflect the DNA of justice that is part of God's character. And furthermore, if we neglect justice, we'll simply miss the opportunity to experience the reality of God as He shows up in the midst of impossible situations, like in Cambodia. So as I close, listen to a few more verses from Isaiah 58. Then when you call, the Lord will answer, "Yes, I am here." He will quickly reply. Remove the heavy yoke of oppression. Stop pointing your finger and spreading vicious rumors. Feed the hungry and help those in trouble. Then your light will shine out from the darkness, and the darkness around you will be as bright as the noon. The Lord will continually guide you, giving you water when you are dry and restoring your strength. You will be like a well-watered garden, like an ever-flowing spring. So now I want to invite you to one way that you can partner with IJM and be relentless with us as we pursue justice together, and that's to become an IJM Freedom Partner. And Freedom Partners are the backbone of our work. They commit to giving at least $24 a month. They commit to praying for us and our work. And they commit to being an advocate and using your voice for those who their voices have been silenced. And this is such a crucial aspect of what we do at IJM that I want to invite you to be part of that. If this is something stirring in you and God is kind of whispering to you, this can be one of your moments, let it be one of your moments. So there's a link that I want to direct you to, ijm.org/sign up. If you are interested in becoming a Freedom Partner, you can just pull out your phone right now and sign up, or I have a laptop in the back and you can come talk to me after this. But I just want to close with, again, saying whatever your moment is, I invite you to be relentless in your pursuit of justice. Because remember, you are called, you are capable because of who God is, and you are ready right now, and the movement needs you. Thank you.